Hello everybody, this is Half-Life 2 Anniversary Edition. Thank you Valve for this finest version of Half-Life 2, bravo. So, let's play it. Alright. Should we play with commentary tracks, huh? How do you think? Why not? Why not? Commentary notes contain audio commentary by the Valve development team to start stop known well act and press use button. You will be vulnerable to damage while listening to this. No achievements cannot be earned in commentary mode. Okay. This is new mode.
Rise and shine,
Mr.
Mr.
Freeman. Rise and shine.
Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until, well, let's just say your hour has come again.
Truly.
The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
Smell the ashes. Or armpits. Oh. The sensitivity is broken.
I didn't see you get on.
I need more. Look. I'm walking. I'm walking on the same place. Let's listen.
Well, end of the line.
Welcome to Cities.
I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of how...
Sorry, Gabe. Sorry, my mouse just really do like maybe this.
Half-Life 2's development.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with the dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we had the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key.
Sure, Gabe.
To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. And please, let me know what you think. You can reach me at gaben@valvesoftware.com. Cool. Thanks. Have fun.
Physics objects. It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static, as in they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it. Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
And so, whether you are here to stay or...
Train station.
Should I say or should I
The
go?
beginning of a Half-Life game has a big job to do. We have to introduce players to a new world while teaching them how to interact with it. Players need to quickly grasp what's happening, who the key players are, what threats they face, and how they fit into it all. Above all else, it has to be as fun and interactive as possible. Nailing this takes a lot of iteration and playtesting, especially on the small moments that make up a bigger picture of the game. In this section, we'll highlight some key moments, game design problems, and a few playtests where things didn't quite go as planned.
Sweeping Vortigaunt. Another key moment of storytelling, and another nod to the physics system. Here, we're showing how Vortigaunts fit into this new world, which is a big shift from their Half-Life 1 role as enemies. Like so many moments in Train Station, the Sweeping Vortigaunt came from our constant hunt for ways to show characters interacting naturally with the physics system. Why just tell players Vortigaunts are friendly now, when you can show one casually sweeping the floor and knocking around some simulated objects? Nothing signals, hey, don't shoot me this time around, like someone willing to tidy up.
I don't know, they're kind of enslaved, right? So, I mean, yeah, they tidying and sweeping, but look at him here. What? So, look at him, he's in this things like contained. He's contained, right? So, I don't know.
Welcome to
Yeah. Let's listen to this.
Metro Cop shoving citizens. We've only walked a few feet and we're already got problems to solve. We're introducing the Metro Cop, an enemy that eventually we're going to ask players to kill, and giving you a glimpse of the world they're stepping into. It's a simple, clear moment that shows the relationships between the Metro Cops and citizens, and by extension, the player. At the same time, we decided to reinforce the existence of the core physics simulation, showing the way in which NPCs can casually interact with objects in the world. Seeing something like a suitcase knock into another and dislodge was pretty novel back then. These moments at the train station, where we combined multiple goals, were the most successful. They felt natural, like the game wasn't pausing just to teach you a lesson.
Teach
Metro
us-
Cop shoving.
Teach us a lesson of what? What lesson?
Citizens. When it came time to design the human citizens of City 17 and the world outside the city, we chose to include a variety of races, ages, and genders. This not only provided narrative context for the Combine's enslavement of all of humanity, but it was also important to us that anyone playing the game could see themselves represented in the Resistance, with everyone on Earth united against the Combine. While we found a number of candidates to use as reference in creating these citizens through our daily lives and connections, we ultimately resorted to advertising in the Seattle Times classifieds to reach the desired range of faces that we'd envisioned.
Him in City 14.
Natural storytelling. To achieve our world building and storytelling goals throughout the train station, we needed a natural way to deliver dialogue without it feeling too gamey or requiring tutorials. We noticed players often approached NPCs to get a closer look, so we turned that into an opportunity for the NPCs to acknowledge the player and deliver their lines. This kept interactions low-key, which was essential since the citizens aren't exactly too cheerful or lively. The simplicity of this approach also aligned with one of Half-Life's core storytelling goals, making the narrative responsive to the player's interest. Some players want to dig into every detail, while others just want to know what to do next. Giving players control over how much story they want to engage with, without it blocking progress, is a goal we always try to maintain in a Half-Life game. Plus, the less complicated a feature is to implement, the more of it we can include.
Surely. Boom.
Welcome to City 17.
Not so welcome, huh?
Early tech planning. Shipping a game always teaches us a lot. We finally get to find out which choices we made were good ones, and which were ones we should do differently next time. So after Half-Life 1, when we sat down to start thinking about what kind of sequel we could build, we had all kinds of player feedback to digest. From it, we tried to build a master list of things that Half-Life 2 was going to focus on. We didn't try to design a specific player experience. Instead, we found it more useful to approach the question from a technological standpoint. Black Mesa's security guards and scientists had worked well, What could we do if we pushed it really, really hard on characters? We liked our interactive storytelling. What could we build that would allow us to do even more of it, and a greater variety? The exploration and interaction with the Black Mesa was compelling to players. Maybe a physics system would allow us to take that further. In all these areas, we tried to imagine the best version of it could look like years in the future, and back solve from that a set of technological steps that might get us there.
Storytelling. Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining these principles, we'd push ourselves to explore deeper, more interactive storytelling.
Just wait until I'll get this pistol. See you next time.
This must be a mistake. I
Bless.
got a standard relocation coupon just like everybody else.
Characters. In Half-Life 1, security guards and scientists could best be described as archetypes.
What he expected to see, like Mitrokov gas mask.
But as our technology improved with Half-Life 2, we saw an opportunity to move beyond abstractions. The increased visual fidelity of the character models, combined with improvements in animation, made us believe we could focus on creating individual characters, people you would actually care about. We allowed ourselves
Barney.
to write real dialogue and have characters deliver it in a way that felt realistic enough for players to not think about them as pawns in a video game, and hopefully
Whoa, wow.
narrative forward. In 2001, a couple of years into development, we were energized by Japan Studios' Ico. Directed by an animator, it blew us away with its reliance on characters as the key connection to the player, giving us the courage to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
Alex is around here somewhere. She would have a better idea how to get him here.
Oh, as long as he stays away from checkpoints, we should be okay. Listen, I gotta go, Doc. We're taking enough chances as it is.
Very well. And, Gordon, good to see you.
Okay, Gordon. You're gonna have to make your own way to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Oh, man, that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover.
Loyal cover.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player to learn.
Blocking tutorials 2. There are two failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break it by tossing all the boxes out the window, which is obviously not great. This leaves them stuck and unable to continue, which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development. Making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We'd never actually seen players do it. Our playtest of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee, so we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing
wow, just disappear.
out the window and see what happens.
See, is this simple?
Blocking tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the players something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many physics-based objects in the game, blocking this behavior without putting ceilings everywhere wasn't really an option. In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to...
Excuse me.
Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do. But for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall. Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do. But for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall without taking damage. Second, it introduces a bit of the game's vocabulary, how the game will communicate with them. Players often worry about taking fall damage, but they also worry about taking a step that they can't take back. So here, a welcoming crate to land on signals that dropping down is safe and it's the way forward. And when the crate breaks, it reinforces the physics simulation and is likely the first time players will see that larger objects can be broken apart.
Pick up that can. Contextualizing tutorials, creating a story scenario in which they happen, lets us do more than just stop the game to teach players something. We get to add narrative value to the moment.
Oh, no.
Here, teaching the player how to throw objects is combined with a narrative setup that gives them a choice in how to respond. After watching the Metro cops casually abuse citizens, it felt right to put the player in a similar position next. If they had opinions on how the citizens should have reacted, now they get to express them. Playtesting showed most players either complied or refused the request to pick up the can, but some tried to avoid the confrontation entirely. Others would comply initially, then retaliate after feeling humiliated. By keeping the moment relatively constrained in both terms of player actions and the space itself, we could generally react appropriately to whatever choice they made.
What if I throw the can here or over there? I will stuck. Yeah, I think so.
Playtesting. Playtesting is a core part of how we make games. We can never fully predict how players will respond or what they'll take away from what we built. So we test to learn and hopefully improve. During a playtest, we don't guide or talk to the player, even if they're stuck, as it's extremely unlikely that we'll be sitting there next to the player once the game ships. Our goal is for testers to forget that they're playtesting altogether and play as if they're at home. Any interruptions risk skewing the data, so we only step in if there's a bug that's blocking progress, or more rarely, if their behavior is so confusing that we need to understand what they're thinking.
I want free meals too. Look, delicious free meals.
Beginning with the basis of the urge to reproduce. We should thank our benefactors for giving us respite from this overpowering force. They have thrown us
S17. Purple, now it's white.
They have given us the strength we never could have summoned.
No, me. Yo, me.
They have turned our eyes toward the stars. Let me assure you that the suppressing field will...
Early in a Half-Life game, one of our goals is to make promises to the player, giving them a sense of what to expect later on. From movies to TV shows and books, All great entertainment does this in some way, and video games are no different. The promises in a Half-Life game can take different forms. Some are simple, like offering just a glimpse of something intriguing. Others are more layered, like the interactions with Metro Cops. By putting the player in a powerless position against them, we set the stage for that future moment when they can finally get to retaliate.
The Citadel. We wanted the player's first view of City 17 to highlight the Citadel and its dominance over the city, representing the Combine's complete and total power over humanity. It also needed to serve as a clear goal. Even at the start, you can see where your journey ends. But despite its massive size, playtesters often missed it. A player's sense of depth and scale can be tricky on a computer monitor. If you've played any games in VR, you'll likely have noticed that scale feels more natural. Anyway, in this case, the Citadel's position above the player didn't help things either, which may be because FPS games train players to focus straight ahead or down at their feet. To improve the chances of players taking in the Citadel, we added birds flying towards the structure. A subtle trick we've found helps guide the player's view.
Ouch.
Strider. This simple moment is a promise that you'll encounter this enormous thing later in the game. Even an uncomplicated scene such as this really does require a lot of playtesting and iteration because of Half-Life's goal of not taking control away from the player. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of small tweaks to ensure that as many players as possible are looking at the right place at the right time here. The street layout and the Metrocop scene are all set to guide the player's gaze, perfectly framing the Strider when it appears.
Exploration. After being herded through the train station by Metrocops, we wanted to give the player a chance to explore. This plaza offered several ways to interact with citizens, Metrocops, scanners, and the city infrastructure. We aimed for these interactions to continue building the world without needing explicit tutorials, and we refined them until they work naturally, without any real training.
Ropes. One of the things we noticed in all of the reference images that we gathered for City 17 was that there were cables and wires everywhere, and that they were a large part of the high-frequency detail in view. We loved the look of these older European cities enmeshed in the haphazard web of modern life. We felt like we needed a solution for cables, ropes, and similar elements, and we wanted them to be dynamic. Our level designers were eager to create plug puzzles, and connecting a cord to each plug helped players better understand the mechanics. Early in production, we built a rope system and iterated on it throughout development. Under the hood, each rope is made of multiple segments stretched between the two endpoints, and they can move independently. Each segment acts like a spring and responds to forces in the game, such as a gentle wind or the passing of a Combine gunship overhead. When rendered, each segment is shown facing the camera and is bump mapped, which is crucial for giving the ropes a realistic, rounded appearance.
Playtesting Anecdote 1. One memorable playtest reminded us that we can never be certain what players are thinking or what lessons they've taken from their experience. This tester, after playing from the start and stuck trying to open a door, spent several minutes going back and forth between the game and the keyboard settings. When we asked what they were looking for, they said they were searching for the inventory controls, thinking they could use an item they'd picked up earlier to unlock the door. While we'd seen them collect and drop several physics objects, they'd misunderstood what was happening. The tester believed that pressing the use key while holding an object moved it into an inventory because the item dropped straight down. We knew it was just gravity, but their assumption wasn't crazy. Some adventure games of that era did slide items into an invisible inventory that way. We explained there was no inventory, and the playtest continued.
God damn it.
We considered whether we needed to address this, but since no other playtesters
How
had
is she
the same
allowed to
confusion,
walk
and all of our
through
potential solutions were more heavy-handed
force
than
field?
necessary, we decided it was an outlier that was okay to remain unaddressed. It served as a good reminder, though, of how even the most subtle, overlooked details can mislead a player.
I like so.
Early game exploration. Up until this plaza, the player likely hasn't had to think much about their path, as it's been clear and straightforward. But here, we wanted to encourage exploration, which meant making the way forward less obvious, which can produce a feeling of being lost or, worse, confused, as you might expect. These kinds of shifts can be tough, especially early in the game when the player is still learning the game's guidance cues. Here, it's further complicated by force-fielded checkpoints, which allow NPC citizens to move through, but restrict the player, leading many playtesters to believe that there was a way to bypass them. Ultimately, it was extensive testing that helped us find the right visibility for the alley forward, using lighting, layout, and a wooden crate, an object players have already used as a sign they're headed in the right direction, all to subtly guide them forward.
Closed captions. During Half-Life 2 development, we were approached by folks interested in accessibility who encouraged us to go beyond the subtitle system we had built for Half-Life 1. They requested a full-featured closed captioning system to capture all game sounds, not just dialogue. This turned out to be a much tougher challenge than expected. Half-Life 2 produced a wide variety of sounds, and categorizing them for captions was crucial. Prioritization was also key. Dialogue needed to stand out, and it had to be clear who was speaking. Ambient sounds, like distant combat, were important for setting the mood in some levels, but less so if there was an enemy shooting nearby. Our level designers also often reuse sounds in different contexts, so sound might require captioning in one area, but not in another. Ultimately, every sound in the game ended up with its own caption data, formatted almost like a small version of HTML, giving us control over the visual style of each caption. As with the audio files, the caption data was too large to keep in memory, so we built an asynchronous caching system to handle it efficiently.
Physics simulation. Even though we began Half-Life 2 with a functional third-party physics simulation, it still took us years of additional work both on the simulation itself and its integration into the game until we felt like we could meet our designers' ambitions. Maintaining a shippable level of quality and performance was something we knew would be a challenge along the way, but the more subtle issue was actually figuring out what to simulate and to what extent. We can't simulate everything, and even if we could, there are game design reasons why the experience is better when we don't. In many cases, we deliberately bend the simulation to improve the player's experience. These adjustments usually go unnoticed because they align with player intentions. For example, we disable collisions between the player and large objects to let them turn in narrow spaces. Or we tweak the Combine rifle's alternate fire to gently guide the Combine ball toward enemies, making it more effective.
Physics Simulation 2. Areas where game design or other constraints impacted the physical simulation often required extra tuning to keep the simulation from blowing up. As an example, early on we experimented with increasing the simulation on the player entity, which is to say, make player movement much more a part of the physical simulation of the world. We knew this might make movement feel less precise, but hoped it could lead to some novel experiences. However, after tuning the movement to match the less simulated version, we hit a major problem. The physical force needed for the player to move at their usual speed was so high that simply running into other simulated objects could result in death from the impact. We iterated on it, but ultimately couldn't find a solution we liked and reverted to the less simulated movement. However, this wasn't exactly the easier path. It introduced new challenges with how the less simulated player interacted with the more simulated objects in the game. But it did allow us to deliver the precise movement experience we wanted.
Crate Baby. This small baby doll has a long legacy. During the long months of internal testing, some of the team turned it into a challenge, a way to make the 47th playthrough of the game a bit more fun. They'd place the doll inside of a nearby blue crate and see how far they could carry it throughout the game. After Half-Life 2 launched, the community started carrying Crate Baby as well, adding their own stories and rules to the mix. A few years later, while working on Episode 2, this was the inspiration for the Little Rocket Man achievement, where players had to carry a garden gnome dubbed Gnome Chomsky throughout the entire episode. Chomsky even made a comeback for Left 4 Dead 2 in the Garden Gnome achievement, where players had to carry him through the Dark Carnival campaign. These kind of interactions with players are some of the most rewarding parts of game development. We design games with theories in mind, but you never really know where things are going until players get their hands on it.
Oh no, I lost it. I lost the baby. I should carry baby, carry. Nice. Like basketball player, huh?
Playground. When we discussed ways to highlight our physics simulation around the city environment, a playground felt like the natural fit. And for players paying attention to Dr. Breen, it's also a reminder of the cost of humanity's surrender to the Combine. We chose a few playground structures with interesting physics potential and began tuning them. Even with the advanced physics simulation we had at the time, setups like this always required hand tuning, as we had fully simulated objects interacting with non- or partially simulated ones, such as the player or static world geometry. It might be easy to assume that a simulation can carry a lot of the load of implementation, but even now, 20 years later, that is rarely the case. Back when we were working on the playground, late in development on the game, we couldn't get the friction on the slide to feel right, so we decided to break the ladder so the player couldn't get up there. However, you still can just walk right up the front. As is commonly the case, you, the player, get the last laugh on us.
Yeah, velocity. Alright, that's all for today. I'll try to carry this doll. Should make a name for this later.